to share, and you'll be able to practice on your own. There you go. All right. Any thoughts on that counting to the one count?
You don't need to know how to count really high. I made it almost to like 12 at times, and then one.
You got
I didn't make it
12.
much past one.
That's what I was going to say. If you got to 12, that you're doing really, really,
I know,
really
yes.
good. But you know, mindfulness and meditation, we always think that it is that the purpose, and I always thought the purpose was to stop the mind from thinking. And in a way that it is, it's a way of controlling the mind to teach it to rest, which it rarely, rarely does, as we can tell that our count continuously goes back to one, no matter what number we got. It's hard for it to rest and not offer thoughts. So the practice of mindfulness and meditation is less about getting the mind to not think, because it's hard for it to not think, but to build a relationship with how it distracts you. Like if you came back to one, what was the thought that distracted? I even had a thought that said, wow, I can count and think at the same time. Silly thought, but it was there. Or what am I going to teach after I'm finished with this meditation? In addition to the joint freeing series, how can I make that bigger? Back to one, right? In the process of learning our mindfulness tools and our meditation, we're really looking to see and to get to know how silly our brain can act sometimes, and to teach it like we would teach a 2-year-old, right? A 2-year-old who's having a temper tantrum, we give them their favorite toy and shake it in front of them and try and get them to calm down and relax and forget about the thing they're tantruming about and bring them back to something that's fun and quiet that they're going to enjoy. And our brain is very much the same way. Its job is to keep giving us thoughts and seeing which ones we're going to engage with and which ones we're going to have that mind chatter over, so that we can give it the breath like our favorite toy. And it's odd. I always found it odd to think of giving myself the breath as my favorite thing, that I would have a relationship and just love being connected to my breath and all of its various messages, because it's something we don't think about doing. But as we really sit down and observe it and allow it to communicate with us, it tells us when we're angry or sad or happy or frustrated. And each of these emotions has a different breath pattern. And so our time sitting and watching and breathing and watching our mind, we might see a thought that's bringing us back to one that is, wow, I have to interview 2 podcast guests today. And then my breath starts to change to a breath of nervousness, like, oh my gosh, I hope I got all my questions down, and blah, 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 blah. And now I'm in a discussion about that instead of mindfulness. But the breath pattern said, you're a little nervous about this activity that's coming up later. How can we bring calm to the situation? So that's the reason to practice this count back to one. It's not to judge ourselves for not being good at meditation. It's to build a relationship with knowing ourselves on a much deeper and better level. So I know that I've judged myself a lot when I'm sitting in meditation, and I insist on staying for the 20 minutes that I set aside to do it. And for that entire 20 minutes, I'm counting 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. So the practice is learning to get the brain to focus, not judge ourselves for not being able to do it. So that's just our little mindfulness meditation rant for the morning. But let's bring our feet out in front of us now. And this is an extremely hard pose. It's so hard that I'm going to sit sideways so you see me from a side view. instead of a front view. So this is like mountain pose, but it's on the ground. It's called Dandasana. And you'll notice that I always have a blanket or something to sit on. And I like these yoga blankets. I have a couple of them. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 that I put under me. And I just take the blanket and fold it this way first. And then again, so yes, in yoga, we do have blanket folding classes. And then again, and I get it to this wrap up. But I also sometimes have 2 or 3, and I really want to buy myself a meditation cushion. So I'll probably get that next. But I want to be on this prop, because if not, I kind of round down like this and my pelvis is going backward, when really what I want it to do is be centered. And if anything, be a little bit more forwardly moved than posteriorly moved. And my sits bones are sitting on the front edge. You can see that my blanket is sticking out behind me. So we really notice the difference, or see if we can find the ease that's different between sitting directly on the ground and bringing ourselves back into this uprightness. So Dandasana pose is a seated mountain pose. It's got an effort and a strength in it. And in yoga, we call that sphira. My toes are pointed towards the sky as if I'm standing in this pose. So my feet are active, toes are to the sky. Now I notice that we all have our eggs. And sometimes if this pose is challenging and we still feel that forward progression, this flexion in the spine that we're struggling with, it might be helpful to just take those eggs and align them with the space behind the knee. So what that does is shorten up that pull in the back body. So notice if that makes this pose better or more challenging. So we play around with these props, with how we can possibly use them to enhance our practice and make it the experience more accessible. So I'm going to take my eggs out because I prefer to have my legs straight, toes to the sky. Again, there's a cue in yoga that shoulders up, back, and down, but that tends to ask for a spinal back bend. You know, when I see people do that with that cue, they arch back. So I'm going to invite you to just put your hands right on your shoulders. So hands come to shoulders. Bring the elbows back to whatever distance you can, but not behind your body, not so there's so much effort, but maybe so they're just in alignment with the torso. Then as you drop the elbows, you'll feel the shoulder blades behind your body drop down. And then the arms can just rest on the ground next to you. This is a great postural exercise to begin to notice how we are in our spine and how we are in our seated position. The tendency to be in our TV watching position is high. And I'm talking because this is a difficult pose. And I want us to really be able to experience the engagement it takes for us to have this straight, great posture. And in order to really feel our lower body and start our joint freeing series, we're going to find some ease in this. So maybe we just wiggle around in that seat a little bit so that we're holding it, but it's not so tight. And then we begin to point our toes. So we're going to take those toes. I'm going to change that wording. We're going to take our feet and push down on the gas pedal, not using the toes, but using the ankles. And then allow the feet to come up as if you're slowing down in the car and you're bringing the tops of the feet toward your shin. And we'll just rotate back and forth between this movement and release of the ankles. You can do it 1 foot. You can use both feet. We're observing for aches, pains, pops, clicks, or compensations. So what I mean by compensation is the ankle creating this movement, or is it initiated by curling the toes and pulling the rest of the foot down? That's why I changed my wording. So this is a movement that we want isolated and initiated is a better word, initiated by the ankle and all of the muscles that control the flexion. And ankles are weird because they have two flexions in their movements. They have plantar flexion, I'm pushing down on the gas pedal. They have dorsiflexion, I'm bringing the dorsal side of my foot back up to my shins. So if you notice a compensation in any of these movements, stop right before the compensation and start over again. Once we notice the compensation and we interrupt that pattern, it doesn't really matter how far down I push down on that gas pedal, how fast I'm going, or how slow I'm moving. My sisters and my son have taken it to making a habit lately of telling me how slow and overly cautious I drive. So maybe I don't push down on that gas pedal quite so hard. Like Maggie and Irene, who are tailgaters. So once we notice those patterns, if we interrupt it right before that compensation, and we let our ego say, that's as far as I can go, even if it's the tiniest little push down on that gas pedal, and we come back up and redo it, we rewire the nerves to the brain that say, this is not right. I want all of my muscles, my prime movers, to do this movement. And the next time the toes make it to the ceiling, you can take one foot and or both, depending on your coordination, and start to make a circle that begins going to your right. So we're going to take those ankles and bring them into a circular movement. We notice how that feels. I've already had a pop or two in those joints. And after the first one, it seems to have gone away. I check in with my toes again, make sure they're not curling to make this movement happen. I like to place my hands on my knees because I don't want the whole leg to be moving from the hips to make my feet go around. I just want this soft, gentle movement in my foot. If one feels better to you, that's great. If you notice a compensation in one but not the other, maybe let the foot that doesn't compensate come to rest and really allow the brain to focus on the movement of the foot or ankle that does. So we're focusing and asking the brain, hey, wake up those muscles that aren't doing their work and help me smooth this circle out. And then the next time you find yourself with the toes up facing the ceiling, or you're finished working with something you've observed, just reverse that circle and notice the difference. What happens? Now, in addition to this muscle work that we're doing, this soft tissue engagement, coordinating the nervous system commands with the actions, the resultant actions. Forgot what in addition to was going to be. So I'll just leave that on the shelf for a little bit. Sooner or later, those words will come back to me. I don't feel so bad because Nick told me the other day he forgot the word lost and he couldn't get the word to come to his brain. So here I thought it was age, but he's much younger than I am. So we make those muscles do their work and we wake up things that are asleep. And when I say we wake them up, that means that you might feel them later, because if they haven't been doing their job and we awaken them, they could get a little cranky, like poking the bear. So be aware of that if you notice any of that later today or tomorrow. And then I'm going to bring my left foot in. Next time I bring those feet to a resting place, I'm going to bring my left leg in. I like to leave my right leg out because it helps to stabilize me, and I don't have to use so much of my core for this next movement. I'm going to take both of my hands and interlace them in my hamstring area, keeping those shoulders back and down, really thinking about the uprightness of my spine. And then With an inhale, I'm just going to straighten my leg. Now I lean back a little bit. I come back. I want the spine to stay upright, but it's okay to not have full engagement with those hamstrings. I mean, with those sits bones. So maybe you do, maybe you don't. And we just play with the knee. And we want it to go straight out. And with the exhale against gravity, bring it straight back in. Now I noticed a little cramp all the way up here in my hip when I made this movement. So the connection between the knee and the hip saying, yeah, I'm not really happy with this movement. So I'm going to make it even smaller and just come down into still moving the knee. And I'm watching my toes. The knee goes extension and flexion. It has one plane of motion. But sometimes I might notice that my foot turns in while I'm making that movement, or it turns out while I'm making that movement. So I want the knee to just come straight out, keep the ankle out of the equation, and let all of the movement be in this flexion and extension. So we lubricate the joint in its plane of motion. And at any time, there's no reason why this movement, where I just tap my toe and lift it a half inch off of my mat, is not as good as this movement where I extend my leg completely. What's really important is that I know when I start to compensate, and I don't allow for that compensation to be part of this movement pattern, regardless of where it is in this arc of movement. So if you notice that there is something going on, then you know that that's part of your daily practice. If there's nothing going on, you can do it if you love it or leave it out. We have limited time to fit in all the things that we want. We're going to switch to the opposite leg, or I'm going to. If you're working on a pattern, stay with your practice. And that's the good thing about this. It's our practice. I reconnect with my uprightness. I set up my pose, my shape, and then I begin to notice. So I already noticed that my left foot already wanted to turn out. So I'm going to put my brains, all of its thoughts, so it's still training that brain, speaking to this leg to keep the knee straight. I hear a little bit of a crunch along the way. Maybe you do too. Let me stop before that crunch. I wanted to lubricate, send fluids, get rid of the crunch. So notice what you notice and be okay with regressing to a much smaller movement until the body catches up. And that could be in this practice or in 3 weeks from now because you continue to do it. So we'll do that. And then we'll let those legs come down and rest for a minute, maybe just shaking them out along the edge of the mat, just really letting them vibrate in peace. You know, we've been doing a lot of work. So we get to feel that. And I'm going to turn once again to a sideward shape. I'm going to keeping those legs out in front. I'm going to bring them to a wider stance. So we're coming into a wide-legged position. Now, initially, you might notice how that changes the ability to have an uprightness in your spine. As the legs come into this abducted shape, if we go beyond what's available to the muscles of the inner thigh and the outer thigh, we're going to feel a rounding in the low spine. And that's our first compensation. It's saying, I don't have enough space to do this, so I'm going to take that space from another part of your body. And that body is the low back. And it's going to make you arch forward to compensate. So if you feel this overarching or flexion as you make this movement, just bring them closer together. The width is non-specific. And then starting with the left leg, we're going to take those toes with initiating at the hip joint. So now the toes aren't doing the work, the ankle's not doing the work, the knee's not doing the work. Everything starts here at this hip. And with this origin, we're going to internally rotate the hip. The big toe will come closer to the earth. We're going to inhale, come back through center. exhale, the pinky toe is heading towards the earth as we externally rotate this hip. So almost like a windshield wiper. We're rocking back and forth, lubricating the hip joint and making sure that we feel the movement in the hip. You may even want to place your hand there. As I place my hand here on my hip joint, I can feel the muscles in the front of the thigh that engage on this internal rotation. And I can feel the muscles underneath my glutes on the external rotation. So if anything other than the hips, be aware of the toes. Are they curled up and active, or do they have ease in them? And then we can just lubricate that hip joint. The next time you find that hip back at center, we're going to take a brief pause. And we're going to do it 3 more times, but this time what our focus is going to be is how much range of motion do I have on internal rotation? How far from the earth is my big toe and that outside joint when I come internal? Then we're going to come back through center and notice the same thing on the external. How far from the floor is that toe? So this is for comparison purposes when we move to the right foot. We're noticing what our range of motion in that hip joint is, and we're using our foot position as our visual. And then we'll let that left leg come to rest. Set up the right, toe is pointing towards the sky, spine is upright with intention, but also ease. And then we begin our rotation in. We'll lubricate for a few times before we really check on that range of motion, because it's unfair to compare at the beginning and the end, one end and one beginning. So we just rotate back and forth, checking in with all of our areas, checking in the toes, checking with the ankles, checking with the knees. Finding that origin at the hip, being okay with progressing or regressing, right? If there's a compensation, back off. If there's no compensation, go in deeper. Maybe feeling the muscles with your hands so you really get this sense of what parts of the body create these motions. Because if the legs feel achy or you have any discomfort, it becomes easier to identify what's contributory when we build a deeper awareness of what our body does to execute movements. Maybe what movements are involved in the crankiness that our body is communicating with us. So we can think of achiness as our body whispering, I want your attention. Can you pay attention more? There's something going on and you're missing it. So I'm asking for your attention. That's why it's not pain yet. It's just this ache. And if we can find the way to resolve the ache, if we listen to the whispers, we never have to hear the screams. And then the next time you find those legs at center, just windshield them back and forth. Notice if you feel anything. This is a momentum thing. It doesn't matter if it's the ankles, the knees, the hips. We're just creating this momentum to let it shake itself out. Shake itself out. And then we'll bring those legs back in and try one more external rotation in those legs. Now that we've warmed them up, we're going to bring the soles of the feet together. So my soles of my feet are together and in alignment. My knees are bent. My hips are externally rotated. And my legs may or may not be down on the ground. So now what we want to feel is abduction, adduction. It's those clamshells if you've ever done them in the gym. So we're going to take an inhale. And using these muscles on the inner thigh, we're going to just lift those knees up a little bit. Doesn't matter how far they go. And then with an exhale, we're going to use the muscles on the outside of the leg to drop those knees back down. So we're coming up into that clamshell. I shouldn't wear black pants. Coming down. And how far we move is irrelevant. What does it feel like? That's what we're exploring. So we bring them up and we let them go down. We want to think about that going down, right? We have the power of gravity to just let them flop down. So we can inhale and bring them up, but rather than just releasing and letting them flop, we're going to try and control the movement. We bring them close and then slowly, with engagement on these outside muscles, our abductors, maybe you feel it up here on the side of the hip. We're going to slowly let that go down. We're going to intentionally bring them to the earth. So do that a couple more times, noticing the left. Does it have anything it's saying? Well, the intention is on the inner thighs, the outer thighs, and the hip joint on the left side. Of course, you always have the option, if this is challenging, to only do one side at a time. It doesn't have to be both. If your brain wants to focus on one, you can just let that left leg come up and down, let the right one have rest. You can even put an egg underneath it if you choose to go with one side and you just really want to be able to observe unilaterally. That's okay too. There are no rules really, except don't be in pain. That's a rule. And then change. If you went to one side, then prop the other leg or let it rest. If you're using both, just let the attention change to the right side. What do you notice that's the same or different? Some things you might want to notice is this movement, this arc of movement, smooth? I can make a smooth movement easily on my left side. My right side, it's like it has a ratchet in it. It's up and down. More so on the down than the up. The up is easy for me. The down, trying to control it and have it be a smooth movement, has vibrations in my leg. Like this resistance that I can't execute the movement easily. So I'm going to make it come up a lot less. I'm only going to take it the slightest bit up off of the ground and bring it right back down. Looking for the place where that movement is still smooth. Once it switches to that ratcheting movement, what my body is telling me is, we don't know who's supposed to make this movement. We don't know what muscle to engage. So we're all trying to run in and do the work for it. And I want the prime mover of muscles that makes this action happen to wake up and do its job. And so as I slow down, I gain more space. I gain more control. Apparently I'm a control freak, I'm finding out. So I guess that's good. All right. And then maybe just take those legs, allow them to come together, wrap your hands around those legs, maybe hug them in. You can even let that head drop a little bit. We've been sitting up in that Dandasana pose, really using our core for a good part of this practice. So maybe we rest. Simple reminder that the joint freeing series often feels like we're not doing much. They're small, very focused movements, but it's not unusual for us to feel them, especially in areas that are compensatory. So we're going to continue with still working on those legs and those hips, but we're going to make our way to our mat and to our back. And maybe have, if you know that you're going to want a pillow or a blanket for Shavasana, bring that close, because we're going to make our transition from our reclined poses right into Shavasana. So because we always want to have a strong core, maybe we come right back to balancing up on those sits bones. Spine is upright, knees are bent. Take a nice deep inhale. As you exhale, engage that core. Feel the belly button migrate towards the spine, giving that engagement for protection of the low back. Then holding on to that engagement, take an inhale. And as you exhale, using that core, just begin your migration back down to the mat. If you feel a compensation, which means you start to curl or roll or arch your back, let those feet come up off of the ground so that the back is protected and we find our way down to our mat in a kind and compassionate way. We're going to feel our shoulder blades resting comfortably on the mat. You want an awareness that both of them are engaged with the mat. Maybe in order to feel them, you bring the arms out into T position to begin, palms to the sky, to position those shoulder blades onto the mat. And then the arms can come into whatever position you want. You don't have to leave them out. You can if you choose. I'm also going to check in with my low back and notice if it's overarched. And if it is, maybe just taking an inhale again and an exhale, that gives us a little bit of engagement. When I do that, I actually have to pick up my pelvis and reposition it a little bit closer to my feet. So now I have an awareness of my shoulder blades. I can feel my sacrum on the mat. My belly button is tucked close to my spine. My feet are flat on the mat, knees to the sky. And we're just going to begin to rock them from side to side. So hands out in T position. You can also put them palms down right next to your body. And just let the knees drift over to the left, keeping that right shoulder blade on the ground. We want this movement isolated to the lower spine, the lower body. Inhale the knees back up to center, exhale them to the right. Doesn't matter how far they go, inhale to center, exhale to the left. Really what we want to do is feel the back of the head resting on the floor, not arching to look behind us, but directly above us on the ceiling. As we inhale back to center, exhale to the opposite side. Shoulder blades rest on the mat, so the movement is isolated to this low spine and those hip joints. And we come back and forth. At any time that the shoulder blades lift, that the arc of movement is unsmooth, we just make this movement shorter. Maybe the knees never get anywhere close to the ground, and they just stay pointing at the ceiling with the smallest of rocks. And as we go from side to side, we feel the glute muscles, the sacrum, the edge of the sacrum, maybe even the outside of the hip joint, depending on our arc of movement. Notice the jaw. Is it clenching and grinding, or is there any place that's holding on? If you have a place that's clenchy, grindy, holding on, has a lot of tension, that's part of the pattern. So let go of that tension and just let this feel kind of soothing. And now that we've warmed up the lower body and we've engaged that core, let's bring both knees up towards the ceiling. So we're looking for this 90-degree angle. We have 90 degrees at the hips. We have 90 degrees at the knees. That's our goal. Maybe your body doesn't do that. I'm going to adjust because I want to feel my sacrum on. I noticed my back started to arch. So notice what you notice. Engage that core. Maybe this is enough of a movement for you. But if it feels right, take an inhale and just lift both of those feet up to the sky. Legs up the wall without the wall. If you have a wall by you, you can always rest them on the wall. This is another great way to get rid of leg ache. We help the heart with circulation when we put the feet above the heart. So all of the blood, all of the lymph, all of the energy that sits in the legs has to pump up against gravity when we're standing, sitting, and walking around. But legs up the wall, gravity helps. The heart doesn't have to work so hard. And we allow all of the stuckness in the lower feet and the legs to flow with ease down this path. The legs up the wall. It's a great pose. Pose or shape that invites ease and relaxation. If you don't have the wall and you're thinking, gosh, my legs are really heavy, feel free to put your hands behind the thighs. Feel free to let one leg come down and leave one leg up. So we find the way that we can experience what's going on in this pose and allow its benefits to enhance. We notice how we feel in these longer held poses. You might even come back to counting the breath. Does the mind just rest here, or is it super active? Depending on how much energy you want to have at the end of this pose, you can bend the legs and bring them down, or you can engage your core on an exhale. Maybe let the left leg drift down towards the mat, bending it at any time that the back has enters the discussion. Maybe it taps the mat and comes back up. A little bit of core work here as we're working against gravity and lowering that right leg. We're doing it with an exhale so that we can control the movement. Of course, you can bend the leg at any time that the back enters the conversation. Tap that ankle and let it come right back up. So just a tiny bit of alternating of core. Maybe that movement stays at the ceiling and it doesn't come down to the floor. It's just moving the legs back and forth as if you're walking on the ceiling. So whatever the core, the low back allows to happen, we just do that. We want the movements to be smooth and executed with grace. And sometimes that means we need to back out and create these smaller movements. And then when you're ready, we're going to do an upside down child's pose by allowing the knees to bend, wrapping the arms around the legs, bringing them close up into the core. So maybe just squeezing them close a little bit for a stretch of that low back. So we want to open up the low back. This is where all of the nerves that come down into the legs exit the spine. Maybe aches can be a nerve compression. It can be a limiting of space. So as we bring those knees close into the heart and really squeeze them in, we can feel this opening in the low back. What else do you notice in that area? Let all the attention rest in the low back. Gently roll from side to side, maybe giving the entire back just a tiny bit of a massage as it engages with the floor beneath you and then rolls to the other side. So we go back and forth, comparing what it feels like when we come all the way over to the left. Then as each part of the back touches the mat, we come through the midline of the spine. The pressure then engages with the right side of the back and all the way over to our side, feeling the shoulder as well. Notice and compare the sensations, left side, right side. one foot and then the other. Find their way back to your mat. So we release the legs with our hand from being held with our arms. The left foot comes down, the right foot comes down, and the legs extend. If you think that you might want a blanket or a pillow or something to make your Shavasana more cozy, set up that space right now. And then find your Shavasana laying down into this place of calm and ease and relaxation. We'll begin Shavasana with a body scan. So allow the awareness to just scan from head to toe. Nice and slowly, visiting with each part of your body, the face, the jaw, the back of the torso, the front of the torso, the glutes, the sacred bowl, hip joints, the upper legs, knees, lower legs, the heels of the feet resting on the earth, the arches, the toes. And then drift off, and I'll call you back shortly. One is called love, undefined. The more we define love, put parameters around love, decide what it is and what is not love, what we think is love, or judge what is love. Love will keep finding innovative ways to teach us what it is to love. Those ways might challenge pre-existing notions. It might be painful when love rips off the mask, revealing its true essence. Allow the awareness to come back into the body, to come back to the breath. Introducing small little movements into the fingers and the toes, rocking the head from side to side, stretching in whatever way is intuitively requested by your body. Bringing the knees up into the heart as a way of transitioning from reclined back to seated. You can roll over onto a side, or sometimes it just feels nice to roll right up, whatever feels appropriate today. As we come back to our seat, remember that it's intentional. So we set it up. Bringing the hands to the heart. Allow that intention to resurface so that the attention is focused on the intention. Thank you, Siva. And Siva has already started our Om while she's speaking to the cat that's sitting out on the deck. So we can join her with a nice deep inhale. May all our thoughts be divinely inspired. May all of our words be authentic and true. May our hearts be touched with love and joy. May the time that we devote to a practice of compassion bring peace to all beings. Om Shanti. Namaste.
Oh my God, she disappeared.
She's good.
I bowed all the way down today.
Well, Barb, don't take this the wrong way, because I mean it in only the most loving of ways. I'm glad you had hip problems or leg problems last night sleeping, because that was just what I needed today.
Good, good. I'm
That was
glad.
like, that really, oh my gosh, that was like such
Yeah.
body awareness. Like, I feel like I'm so aware of the two different sides and how different they act.
Yeah, and they do act different for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, will you send that to me?
I will. I will.
Okay.
And we could, I mean, how different the two sides act from yoga and mindfulness practices. We could stay with that for another hour, right? Because
Yeah.
right side is all our male energy, and not specifically men, but that we have both male and female energy. So it could be male, it could be our own like tendency to overthink or be way too linear in our movements. She was going absolutely crazy chasing something that's out on my deck. She just fell off the couch. Wait, I gotta help her. She's stuck.
Oh, jeez.
She's gonna have a hip problem now. She had one hip falling off the couch,
Oh,
the other on
Oh,
and she's trying to balance on the windowsill with one leg hanging and one leg stuck on the couch. It's crazy.
so she's relating to us, the different sides acting differently, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you can explore that too. Right male, left female, right? Where is their ease? Where is it stuck? There's just the physical way that we look at all of this. What's my body saying? And
Yeah.
we tend to think more in terms of how does my body feel, because it's so tangible. It's easy to figure out. It's easy to notice, right?
Mhm.
My knee hurts, my back hurts, my shoulders hurt, whatever it is, it's a tangible sensation. But when you notice left to right or some other things that are going on, maybe we're not so separate from our traumas, our joys, our emotions, right?
Mhm.
All the
Mhm.
energy parts of us that we don't pay quite as much attention to.
Yeah.
So I will
Definitely.
send this
Okay,
as a
thank you.
recording, or do you want to see it? Do you want the whole big file or a small file to listen?
Oh, I can just listen. Yeah, well, whatever. Sorry, Eileen.
No, that's
You
fine.
can-
I was trying to, you know what, send the listen, and I'll try it for the first time, and see. I think I should be able to, because that wasn't too, I know what we're doing.
There's not much to see, but I'll also upload it to the YouTube channel and send
Okay.
you. So the audio file is easy. I can text that because it's so small.
Okay.
The other one has to get uploaded, and it has to go through YouTube, but I'll do that
Yeah.
as well with this.
Okay, that sounds good.
Perfect.
Have a great day.
All right, you guys
Friday.
too. Enjoy. Yeah, see you Friday.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.